Have you ever thought about a wound that doesn't bleed? One that you can't see, but that can absolutely shatter a person's sense of self? Well, that's what we're talking about today. It's called moral injury, and it affects some of the most resilient people out there. We're talking soldiers, doctors, journalists, first responders. It's this deep, invisible wound that happens when doing your job violates your most fundamental moral beliefs. So here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to unpack what this invisible wound really is. Then, we'll see how it's different from PTSD. After that, we'll look at just how widespread this is, and finally, we'll explore the path to recovery. All right, let's get right into it. What exactly is this invisible wound? Think about what healthcare workers went through during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. They were facing just impossible ethical choices every single day. Situations that pushed them right to the edge, and sometimes right past their own moral breaking points. This quote, wow, it just nails it. Moral suffering isn't just being stressed out, it's a profound anguish. It's the emotional weight of being caught up in things that go against everything you think is right. And the key part, that stress is unrelieved. It just doesn't go away.
Okay, so here's the more formal definition. Researchers like Brett Litz describe moral injury as the lasting fallout from being involved in acts that transgress or, violate your deepest moral beliefs. And this is so important. It can happen whether you're the one doing the act, you failed to stop it from happening, or you were simply there to witness it.
So, what does this actually feel like for someone going through it? Well, the symptoms are incredibly deep and personal. We're talking about intense, gut-wrenching guilt and shame. It's about losing trust, not just in your leaders or your organization, but sometimes even in yourself. It can show up as this powerful sense of betrayal, a crisis of faith, and just this relentless, looping cycle of blaming yourself.
And that brings us to a really important distinction. A lot of people hear about this and think, oh, so it's like PTSD, but it's not. They're fundamentally different, and it all comes down to their source. One is born from fear, and the other is born from transgression.
Let's break this down. PTSD is a fear-based disorder, right? It's a direct response to a life-threatening event, and that leads to symptoms like flashbacks and being constantly on edge. Moral injury, though, is transgression-based. It's a wound to your conscience, a wound to your soul. It comes from breaking your own moral code, and that's what leads to those feelings of guilt, shame, and betrayal we were just talking about. Now, they can definitely coexist, but they are not the same thing.
And this quote just captures the sheer depth of that wound. Psychiatrist Jonathan Shea, who's a real pioneer in this field, calls it an undoing of character. Think about that. This isn't just a bad memory you're trying to get over. It's an injury that can make someone question who they fundamentally are. It attacks their entire sense of self.
So, moving on. While this idea of moral injury really got its start with studies of military veterans, what we understand now is that it is a widespread syndrome. It stretches far beyond the battlefield. It really impacts anyone whose job throws them into these high-stakes moral minefields. We've talked about healthcare workers making impossible choices. Think about first responders who witness tragedy day in and day out, social workers trying to fix lives within broken systems, or even journalists who have to cover horrific events and feel completely powerless to do anything about it.
Now, this is a really cool way to visualize it. This model shows that moral injury isn't some on-off switch. It's a spectrum. Over on one end, you have common, everyday moral frustrations. But as you move along this continuum, the level of psychological harm gets more and more intense, moving through moral distress until you reach the fore end, a full-blown moral injury.
And this is maybe the most important takeaway of all. Two people can go through the exact same event, but only one of them might end up with a moral injury. Why is that? Because the injury isn't caused by the thing that happened out there. It's caused by the internal conflict, that profound sense that your own personal moral framework has been violated. Okay, this all sounds incredibly heavy, I know, but there is hope. There is a path to recovery. So for our last section, let's talk about how these invisible wounds can actually begin to heal. It's time to move from the problem to the solutions. Healing is definitely not a one-size-fits-all kind of deal, and the treatments reflect that. You've got secular therapies like ACT, which helps people learn to accept difficult feelings instead of fighting them, and CBT, which helps you change the negative thought patterns that are fueling all that guilt. Then, for people where faith is really central to their life, there are paths that integrate those same therapies with spiritual beliefs. And a third path involves pastoral care, which can use powerful tools like telling your story and finding forgiveness to help heal.
So what's the goal here? Well, it's not to make someone forget what happened. That's impossible. Instead,
Recovery is all about helping a person accommodate the experience. It's about integrating that moral violation into a new, more flexible, and ultimately more functional belief system. It's about reducing that constant inner conflict.
So what does this recovery process actually involve? Well, research points to 3 really key things. First, a real active investment in your own well-being, body, mind, the whole shebang. Second, and this one is so crucial, is social connection. Specifically, connecting with peers who get it, who have that shared experience and can offer support without judgment. And finally, it's about accepting boundaries, learning to see your own role inside a much larger system. This isn't about passing the buck, it's about right-sizing the blame, which is absolutely essential to move past that self-condemnation.
And that brings us to our final and maybe most critical question. While individual healing is absolutely vital, the real challenge, the big one, lies with our institutions. How can the military, our hospitals, our newsrooms, how can they build systems that protect their people not just from physical harm, but from these deep, invisible wounds to the soul? That right there is the conversation we all need to be having.